Okay, kicking off our mid-afternoon sessions, we have Jared Islis here with the Metro Nashville Planning Department.
Thank you. All right. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jared Islis, and I'm a urban planner and designer with the Metro Nashville Planning Department. I work within the urban design division of the department, and I'm excited to be here today to tell you about the Downtown Code Bonus Height Program, which is an incentive-based program to earn development additional entitlements within the downtown area. To start this presentation, I wanted to take us back to 2008, which is a really important year within downtown Nashville, as it really indicates the beginning of this transformational growth that we've seen in the last 15 or so years. So you can see here in this aerial image of downtown in 2008, many surface parking lots, small warehouse buildings that are usually 1 or 2 stories. You see some recognizable structures like Bridgestone Arena in the middle and some of the downtown core, a central business district north of Broadway, but then this large area to the south and west of downtown is that really underutilized land. Fast forward to today, 2025, we look at downtown and you can really see a ton of changes, and in particular in that southern and western parts of downtown. You see fewer parking lots, while there are still some, but fewer parking lots. You see many more of this recognizable typology, which we call Texas Donuts or Texas Wraps or podium style buildings. You'll also see towers and larger footprint buildings, civic buildings like Music City Center, the Convention Center, and another Nissan Stadium on the East Bank. This change really, shows itself in the skyline. This is an image that, was posted online a few years ago comparing the 2015 downtown skyline to the 2024 downtown skyline. You see in that first image, one of the most recognizable buildings in downtown, the Batman building, pretty clearly visible within the skyline. But then almost 10 years later, Batman building kind of fades into many other high-rise buildings. This growth and development that we've seen downtown really stems out of Nashville Next's growth and preservation concept map. Nashville Next is our city and county's general plan, and the growth and preservation concept map is a visualization of the strategies and work that went into that plan. On this map, you can see all of the centers within Davidson County shown in different shades of orange. The Tier 1 centers are the darkest shade of orange, and the largest Tier 1 center is at the very center of Davidson County, where downtown Nashville is. Davidson County is also split up into 14 different community planning areas, and so one of those community planning areas is the downtown. And so you see here the overlap between the downtown community planning area, which is the black outlines, and that Tier 1 center in the orange fill. I guess one more thing I'll say about the Tier 1 center is that not only is downtown Nashville the largest and most centrally located Tier 1 center within Davidson County, but it's also, in most senses, the centralmost center within the Middle Tennessee region, as well as the state of Tennessee. So there's a lot of, eyes and pressure on this area. I brought us back to 2008 to start this conversation because that really was the kickoff to conversations around updating zoning within the downtown area. Prior to what we now call the Downtown Code Zoning District, much of the downtown Nashville area was zoned CF, or core frame. This had zoning regulations such as a 5.0 FAR and a 65-foot maximum height at the street with a sky exposure plane. And so I'll show a graphic of that here in a minute, but those standards really limited the kinds of development that could be approved by right within the downtown area. And so, in that time, and shortly after, as new developments were coming in, many of them had to go through different rezoning processes or variance processes that added time, money, and other costs to developers. And it really indicated a challenge with our zoning based on the demand that downtown was seeing. And then as we spoke about at the beginning, there was a lot of different things in downtown Nashville in 2008. So the Downtown Code Zoning District, which really came out of the Downtown Community Plan, was envisioned as a tool to facilitate investing and building. They wanted to look at how we could turn over some of the 60% of land in downtown from single-story buildings and surface parking lots into mixed-use development. And at that time, there were only 5,000 residents downtown. So after a 2-year-long engagement process in 2010, the Downtown Code Zoning District was adopted by Metro Council. The Downtown Code Zoning District is a form-based code which really regulates the massing and the form of the building over the particular uses in the building. So that really enabled the mixed-use development that planning envisioned and community envisioned. The form-based code was organized into 14 different sub-districts, pretty similar to that previous map that I showed with all the neighborhoods within downtown outlined. Each sub-district has its own height standards and other bulk standards. And then this map shows how the former zoning parameters with that 65 feet at the street with the sky exposure plane really limited the forms and massing of buildings within the downtown environment. And then under the downtown code, when entitlements are now measured in stories, it gave developers a lot more wiggle room to propose different buildings. So in 2010, as part of the downtown code adoption, there was also a program instituted with it called the Bonus Height Program. This is a incentive program where in exchange for providing public benefits within a particular development proposal, a property owner or developer could earn additional entitlements on top of the kind of by right standards from the general sub-district standards. And so this diagram really shows how in sub-districts there's a base height that's prescribed for sub-districts, but then the bonus height program, most sub-districts permit a number of additional stories to be built if you follow those bonus options. There's also a separate procedure called an overall height modification, which some of you may have heard about. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that today, but that is a separate process. It requires a planning commission approval as opposed to the bonus height program, which is a completely administrative review and approval. So in 2010, the bonus height program was made up of 9 bonus options. These are the options that were on the board in 2010. And a lot of these bonus options were calibrated in a sense that depending on the level of effort that a property owner or developer put into contributing to that benefit corresponded with how much bonus height you earned. So for example, if a property owner wanted to build a building, but on their site they also wanted to build an open space, if they built a 500 square foot open space, they would get less bonus height than if they were to build a 1,000 square foot open space. So there was a multiplier on the amount of public benefit that the developer provided. And that's pretty much true for all of these. So I wanted to show a couple case studies of how the program works and how developers have actually used the bonus height program in the past. So this first project is a very tall building. It's in the downtown core sub-district of the downtown code. And so it has a maximum height by right of 30 stories with an unlimited bonus height maximum. So this property owner, this developer, could use all of the bonus options available to them to the highest extent possible and still keep going if they could earn it. However, they decided to tap out at a respectful 60 stories. So you can see on the bottom left, they've used, what is that, 6 different of the 9 bonus options: LEED, pervious surface, historic preservation, civil support space, which I'll point out, you might know in downtown Nashville, the YMCA just got expanded. That's that civil support space that this developer contributed to. And then upper level garage liner and underground parking. They also earned some bonus from transferred bonus height, which I won't go into. But that's how they got up to their 60 stories. Another case study is in the Gulch subdistrict. This one's a little bit different because in the Gulch there are bonus height maximums. So they can't earn unlimited, they have an additional cap. So the by right height is 10 and the bonus height maximum caps them at 16. And so this project, the Harlow on Division Street, used 3 of the bonus options: LEED ND, upper level garage liner, and underground parking to earn those 6 additional stories. And then, as I've mentioned, a lot has changed in the last 15 years of the downtown code. You might have heard that Nashville is ULI's top market to watch and was for 3 consecutive years. There's hundreds of millions of dollars of building permit value within downtown, more than anywhere else in Davidson County. And then our population just within the downtown code zoning district geography has almost quadrupled within those 15 years and is expected to continue to grow. So all of that really points to the question of, is this bonus height program still working for what we need today? We're not opposed to amending the downtown code. We've done it several times over the last 15 years, including to add additional sub-districts, to introduce new design review processes and other general standards. And so this effort to update the bonus height program that we initiated in 2023 really was kind of the next step of that. Another reason we decided to update the bonus height program was because of some of these patterns and trends from the program that we began to notice. And so there's been 43 projects that have certified bonus height. So that's the final step of this process. So after you propose a project, you get your final site plan, then you go to building permits. The final step is bonus height certification. So the 43 have made it all the way through that process. There's another 10 or so that are somewhere before that, but it's really showing that the vast majority of developments downtown are using this program to earn additional entitlements. And when we look at which bonus options they're using, it starts to show a picture of what developers lean towards and what developers don't lean towards. So you'll see here, underground parking is the highest, most utilized bonus option on the menu. 25 different projects have used it. And then another 15 each for upper level garage liner and public parking have used those options. And all the way at the end, 0 people have used open space. I think 2 or 3 people have used civil support space, and 2 or 3 people have used historic building preservation. And that's sad as planners. So looking at, the amount of square feet that has been earned and used through the bonus height program from those bonus options, 90% of the bonus height earned within downtown over the last 15 years has come from one of those 3 parking bonuses. And then less than 10 has come from other, arguably more valuable bonuses. And so at the outset of updating this program, we really took some time to understand what makes a successful bonus density program. And those things are on the screen now. So one thing is the ability to measure impacts. With a bonus program, developers need to know within very clear expectations what is going to be expected of them and what is a reasonable range of costs that might be for them. That way they can calibrate it into their performa and make sure their development stays feasible. the use of the bonus program must also create additional value for them, and we achieve that by offering bonus height incentives, and so they can get more leasable square footage within their project. And then the offset of the density must provide sufficient additional value to offset those costs. And then lastly, it must be easier than a rezoning process or a variance process, or at least more readily available. Otherwise, they'll just go straight to that and not bother with any of this. And so in updating the bonus height program, our main objective and goal was to better reflect the current and future needs of downtown residents, workers, and visitors. And a couple ways we did that, which I'll explain, are by introducing baseline requirements to the program. These things are requirements that a developer must fulfill prior to using one of the other bonus options in gaining access to the full program. These sort of things are joint priorities between the city and the public, as well as development community, and so we find them to be really great to have as kind of that baseline. We've also adjusted the menu of bonus options to reflect modern priorities. As we've said, downtown has changed a lot over 15 years, and so our priorities as a city and what we are incentivizing should also keep up with that. And then lastly, we've recalibrated some incentives to make some bonus options less valuable than what they currently are, and others more valuable than what they currently were. So this process to update the bonus height program started off in March 2023, and by the end of it, which wrapped up this summer, it took about 2 years, which interestingly enough is about the same amount of time that was taken for the public process for the original downtown code zoning district from 2008 to 2010. In May of 2023, we released an initial draft of an amended bonus height program menu, which you'll see on the screen here. And I think if I would describe this in any way, it was a big swing from that original list of 9 bonus options. We've expanded the menu. There's now 10 bonus options and 5 what at the time we were calling prerequisite requirements. Later they'd be referred to as baseline requirements. But this introduced new bonus options, all of the ones that you're seeing in green, and then revised bonus options, the ones in light blue. We did a full round of engagement with this menu and this proposal, speaking with the public and the development community, designers, to try to understand the impacts of what this menu and rethinking of how additional entitlements are earned would impact them. And a big takeaway we got from that, especially from the development community, was, hold on, you're changing the way we access our entitlements. How is that going to impact the market and project feasibility? And so we took a break and we scoped a market study, worked on that with HRNA advisors and Gensler. And we worked on that from fall of 23 to fall of 24, basically. And I'm going to show a couple slides from that document and that process that they undertook in that project. But the market scan and demand analysis really looked at what is the current demand for uses within the downtown code zoning district across multiple sectors. So they looked at market rate housing units, office space, retail space, and hotels. And they looked at demand through 2040. And if we added all that up, we found that there was a demand for an additional 22.6 million square feet of development over the next 15 years. And we used that number to really understand how our current entitlements and current bonus height structure met those expectations and that demand. They also found that, within reasonable expectations, the population within downtown is expected to continue to grow. I said that we've almost quadrupled within the last 15 years, but over the next 15 years, we're expected within downtown Nashville to be at between 35 and 43,000 residents. They also looked at the menu that we proposed in 2023, and they analyzed those options, the new bonus options and the calibrated options, as well as the baseline requirements by using excess value, which is really looking at, understanding all of the development costs and what a developer can expect out of that value. And once you factor in the added cost of providing the benefit and then the proceeds from the height bonus, if excess value remains, it tells us that the calibration of the incentive is good enough for the developer to find interest in using it. If the added costs, the red bar, were to exceed the green bar, that would mean that there is no incentive for the developer to use that bonus option. And so HRNA used that methodology to look at several different building typologies commonly found within the downtown area, and within general terms, looked at the financial feasibility of each of those building types, and if they were to use a set of revised bonus options, if the product would either be financially feasible, if it would be financially feasible under certain conditions and what those conditions might be, or in the case of a mid-rise concrete structure, if it were to be financially infeasible. All of this information helps us fine-tune and calibrate the revised bonus options. And so they also provided to us a set of revised baseline requirements and bonus options. They said, these three prerequisites or baseline requirements, they have a neutral or they don't have a huge impact on project feasibility, and so those could, factoring in the bonus height, they don't have a huge impact on project feasibility, but things like overhead utility line relocation and water reduction runoff, they have such variable costs that it's unreasonable for a developer to be able to factor that into their pro forma. And then they did that same analysis for the bonus options. So we really narrowed the selection down from that May 2023 menu of 15 boxes down to 3 baseline requirements and 6 bonus options. And as this is the final proposal and what ended up getting approved by Planning Commission and Council earlier this year, I will kind of run through these ones. I didn't want to run through the ones that kind of got chopped, but these ones, the baseline requirements, green building certification, upper level garage liner, and active and sustainable transportation, all of these represent, core priorities for us as a city within our downtown environment. And moving forward into the future, we'd love to see development contribute to these baseline requirements. During the process of amending this, we revised the proposal to award developers 2 floors of bonus height for just completing the baseline requirements. Under an initial draft, they would have gotten nothing from fulfilling the baseline requirements and would have been able to then earn bonus height through the bonus options, but kind of recognizing the level of effort that they put into just fulfilling those, we found it reasonable to give them 2 stories. And then the 6 bonus options are pretty similar to what we have on the books today. We've amended, or kind of tweaked the language of these to provide different standards related to them. We've also tweaked the calibration, so we've made preservation, privately owned public spaces, which is the open space bonus, and neighborhood support space. We've made all of those more valuable to developers by increasing the yield they get from including those. We've decreased the value of the underground parking bonus, but we decided to leave it in there because it does provide some good urban design qualities by removing parking from the visible public realm. And then the only new bonus option that we added is reduction of vehicular parking. And this one is added because, and I should have mentioned this earlier, I'm sorry, but in the downtown code zoning district, we do not have parking maximums, we do not have parking minimums. And so a development could come in and propose 0 parking spaces with their high-rise building, hotel, residential, office, whatever, and they wouldn't technically need to provide parking. And that's what made the over-reliance on these parking bonus options a little bit alarming, because we're basically incentivizing people to provide something that they're not required to provide. And so by tweaking the organization of the menu and by introducing this reduction of vehicular parking, we're able to give developers a little bit more incentive to propose a project that at the minimum provides fewer parking spaces than what they would be allowed to provide under the code. Or if they want to, they could provide no parking spaces and contribute to the walkable and transit-friendly environment that downtown Nashville is envisioned to be. To address the financially infeasible mid-rise building typology, HRNA recommended that we look at where policy may be acceptable to increase the bonus height maximum calibration. And so we looked at all of the supplemental policies and kind of general policies within the downtown community plan, and found that the high growth, high density subdistricts to the south and west of downtown, the Gulch and Lafayette subdistricts, where those currently have bonus height maximums, or at the time had bonus height maximums in the mid-rise height range, we proposed increasing those to a high-rise height range, which is more in line with the types of development that were being proposed there anyways. A lot of projects were going through that overall height modification process. However, in the other sub-districts to the north of the central business district, within the central business district, or sorry, not the central business district, but Lower Broadway and kind of the historic core, and then Rutledge Hill and Rolling Mill Hill, the heights of those sub-districts, which are currently set at low to mid-rise heights now, those are really set in there for the context of what those neighborhoods are. And so by kind of just focusing, adjusting entitlements in the Gulch and Lafayette, we thought that that was the best place to do that. Okay, and then lastly, I'd say that we wrapped things up. We got final recommendations from HRNA last fall, and did a couple more review cycles with the development community and the public, and finally, in the spring of this year, we got into our public hearing phase. So text amendments at Metro are required to have 2 public hearings at Planning Commission and 3 hearings at Council. And so by the time we started that in February, it didn't kind of get finally approved until June of this year. And then we've instituted a 12-month transition period, which you see here on this timeline. And that's really to aid in development that's already in process and that has gone through a concept plan approval using the existing previous bonus height program from 2010. So that way we're not leaving them kind of flat-footed. They're still able to finish out their project using that system of entitlements, and are able to, within 12 months, wrap that up. And then anything after that, they'll have to use the new amended bonus height program that was adopted earlier this year. And then just lastly, wanted to kind of indicate some additional thoughts. And I think one question that you all may be asking is, what about the attainable housing bonus? That was enabled by state legislation in 2024 during this process, and we now have a team working on understanding how we can incorporate a voluntary attainable housing bonus option, not only into the bonus height program for downtown, but also in broader different areas of Nashville and Davidson County through our other zoning districts. We wanted to kind of take a comprehensive look at all of that. And then we're also considering the future impacts of the bonus height program and where we could take things. So right now we're exploring a transferable development rights bank and understanding how, right now it's really, if you have excess bonus height, it's up to you to figure out where that goes. But with a TDR bank, it could be that, people could buy and sell rights from the bank and not have to go through a singular entity. We're also looking at adjustments to base entitlements in some sub-districts, and then finally expansions to the geographic boundaries of the BHP, because as we all know, not all development ends at the interstate line, which is where the downtown code zoning district currently ends. So yeah, that's all I've got. I don't know if we want to do questions now or. Yeah, okay, so we'll come back. I'll pass it over.
I guess this isn't a PowerPoint, so won't be flipping that. My name is Will Stout. I'm with the law firm Winstead PC. Ah, there we go. And then this is Keith. All right, this is Keith Randall, also with Winstead PC. I do land use and entitlements. Keith does construction. And so we are a Texas firm who does a lot of public finance in Texas. So when these new infrastructure districts laws passed in the last 2 years, there was a residential one in '24, and then this one that is broader and covers more uses passed this past year. It's pretty exciting for us. It's something we're going to dig into. So as you all know, because it's kind of on y'all to plan for it, we're growing fast in Middle Tennessee and just in Tennessee in general. It's a fast-growing state. We should pick up another House seat in the next redistricting cycle. So we're growing fast, and we are behind on infrastructure. So TDOT predicts that we're about $62 billion worth of infrastructure behind. So there's a lot to catch up, and to do that, the General Assembly decided to model this infrastructure district law after Texas's law, which allows, in Texas, they're called PIDs, Public Improvement Districts. And what it is a financing tool where a developer can come in, create a district working with a municipality or county, and then assess their underlying properties. And those assessments will be used to finance bonds. And those bonds will be sold by underwriters on Wall Street, who will then give money to the town, who will then give money to the developer to build certain infrastructure. And that infrastructure must be turned over to a government entity, so it has to be dedicated. There's a couple weird scenarios where you don't have to dedicate it, but the math just doesn't work out that way. So, like I said earlier, we have two different laws. We have the Residential Development Act of '24 and then the newer '25 Act. I would be shocked if anyone uses the '24 Act. It's just not as robust as the '25 Act. If you see something with the '24 Act, it's probably old. The '25 Act doesn't have the $5 million minimum. It has a $1 million minimum. It adds parking and impact fees, which can be used to cover as infrastructure costs. The bonds can cover. The old act required you to have at least 50% residential. The new act does not. So a lot wider in scope. There's some additional things in the new act that will change, such as there are specific provisions added for prepaying assessments that are underlying property, and there's also some information about maximum levy rates and then how much your lien to value ratio could be. Typically, though, your underwriter's not going to let you get anywhere close to that anyway. So how it works. The players in this are, you have a developer who come in and wants to build a project. You also have the municipality or government, and then you have the underwriter. So what happens is the developer comes in, they want to form a district, and then they'll kind of get with the municipality, and at some point, one of the parties will engage an underwriter. That underwriter ultimately works for the municipality. The three parties together will issue bonds, and then using eligibility rules, they'll determine how that money gets paid. That'll all get figured out on the front end, and that will be used to fund infrastructure. So, getting ahead of myself. Also, to kind of chime in here, there are kind of certain underparties here. A lot of times developers will have financial advisors. So these are firms that help the developer price the bonds and determine how much properties can be assessed where they still sell well. And then also on the other side, municipalities and counties will hire administrators to help run these districts. So the theory there is counties and cities have a lot of going on. They don't need to manage this. This is adding more to their plate. So the thought is there are these companies that manage these for municipalities, and this is how it works in Texas and Florida and California. And essentially, the city or county doesn't have to do anything, is the dream scenario and hopefully the most likely scenario. And so how this starts is the developer will file a petition with the municipality. By state law, the municipality will have to have a hearing on that petition within 30 to 45 days. That's pretty fast. We are advising people, guys, you're going to have to go talk to these municipalities way before you file a petition because no one is going to be able to turn that around and figure it out that fast. That's something where the state thought it was a really good idea to put that timeline in. In reality, petitions are going to get filed and you're going to get automatic no's. So we're advising people to really, file ahead. Once this public hearing happens, it will help create this special district, and that special district will then issue the bonds. And these bonds are issued through the government entity that the district resides within. And then as part of those bonds, special assessments will be levied on the property, and then those properties will be developed and the infrastructure gets built. The upside here is that the developer can start building infrastructure at any point in this process. So there are two types of bonds here. There's construction bonds and reimbursement bonds. Construction bonds are issued, and then the developers will submit pay apps for the city to draw on as they build. The other way you could do this is reimbursement bonds, to where the developer gets going, they're like, hey, this is complicated, I need to put a road in, and they start building that. Then they come to the city and ask for reimbursement later. And so these are bonds secured by assessments on the property within the district. And like I said, there's reimbursement and construction. Typically, reimbursement bonds have a lower interest rate, and construction bonds have a higher interest rate. So what's eligible here? So this is, you see a couple of asterisks. Those are from the 25 Act, not the 24 Act. There should also be an asterisk on impact fees. So these are all the things that can be funded with these bonds, as long as these things are dedicated to a public entity. And by public entity, it has to be government or government adjacent. There's some very strange tax rules, so we tell people to stay away from electrical co-ops, and you can't dedicate it to Piedmont Gas, right? But if you have a public utility company that you can dedicate infrastructure to, streets, roads, and bridges are the easiest things, as long as they are not private streets. They're getting dedicated to the city, you can fund that. And it's all the costs associated with this. Land dedicated to public purposes, so the developer can attain land and then dedicate it as a public park, and then the part of the cost of obtaining that land can then be financed in the bond because that land is being dedicated for a public purpose. And these also apply to, and this is a question we get a lot, on-site or off-site. So let's say a development needs a pump station off-site because you're having to put it in a force main. If that pump station can be financed through these bonds as in relation to the proportion that pump station benefits the property within the assessment district.
Yeah, so thanks, Will. So we've discussed the how. I think it's important, especially for people in this room, to discuss the why. And for developers, it makes sense. It's another source of financing. It's a lower interest rate. They have upfront capital access for their municipal infrastructure. They don't have to use equity or a construction loan, so that the money that they're using on this infrastructure is cheaper, which ultimately could lead to a more upscale development with a lower cost. The timeline, we'll discuss the 45-day timeline on getting the IDD approved. It's an understood timeline. As long as you're working with the municipality on your other entitlements, you can have a similar conversation. And the statute has that timeline. The moment you file the petition, there is a timeline for it to be approved. As part of the petition, you know what your infrastructure costs are. So you're working with a financial advisor, you have an assessment of what those costs are. You also know how your property is going to be liened, how it's going to be affected by these assessments encumbered. So you can price out what that is going to do to your final sale price, particularly in the single family home context, which I don't know if Will said is probably the most likely context for now on using these IDDs. With an IDD, you can build out that infrastructure early. So you know that you're going to start a development, you're going to have capital for that development, you're going to create the supporting systems and not have a development that sort of ends nowhere. And then finally, you're sharing risk potentially with your neighbors who are doing similar infrastructure developments and the city and attaching it to the property. So you're not taking money from equity and paying that 20% or a construction loan at 12%. So for you all, for municipalities, what are the benefits of IDDs? This is not something that is required to be given to a developer. So it's not as of right. The municipality has to agree to it. So there can be conditions. Ultimately, there's no burden on the general taxpayer. The land under the IDD pays for that IDD. It only burdens the land that is benefiting from it. So future development is paying for itself. It allows you, IDDs allow you to guide development. You can say, there's this part of town that we want to increase infrastructure. We want to increase development in this direction or this area. The city can let that be known. The municipality can say, we are interested in having IDDs and increased infrastructure in this portion of our town. Come to us with ideas about how you can build that out. It also pays for itself. Will mentioned the administrators. The bond ultimately pays for those fees. So the city is not coming out of pocket to collect that taxes. So it's entirely revenue neutral. Managed growth. You can manage infrastructure to keep pace with development. We're all looking around Middle Tennessee and other parts of Tennessee and looking at infrastructure issues are limiting growth in Middle Tennessee. If you just think about sewer moratoriums and other issues that we're dealing with day in and day out, this is a new tool to increase investment and increase access to capital for both municipalities and developers to work together to manage some of those infrastructure issues that we're all facing. And then finally, we've seen this in Texas. There are municipalities that agree to use IDDs and municipalities that don't want to use these new tools, whether it's because they're intractable or they don't want to burden their landowners. You can see a distinct difference between the types of developments in both of those places. You can get, as some of the financial advisors who've been doing presentations about this around the state, you can get development plus if you give them an IDD. You won't just get the bare minimum infrastructure that's required by the entitlements. You can get parks, you can get bike lanes, you can get additional attractions for residents because of lower capital costs. So the developer, much like height benefits, is willing to put more in because they're getting more out of it. Again, benefits, residents benefit as well. So we're not putting in developments that don't have infrastructure completed. We're not having developments at the end of the line that are not connected to town. You, as municipalities, are able to guide these developments so you're not having incomplete development as you're building in your county or city. There's also input, community input. You have to have a public meeting about this, much like every other entitlement. I mentioned before targeted infrastructure. If you have certain areas where you want to increase your development and infrastructure, you can do that. You can tell developers, you can tell the community that we want to build in this direction. We need to increase our sewer capacity, from Metro. So what we need to build down, and we will allow IDDs to increase our capacity coming down from where we need it. And then finally, it pays for itself ultimately. In the single family home example, which is the most most common example, each of the homes is assessed $500,000 a year over 30 years. So you're not burdening these homes to such an extent that it doesn't make economic sense to have both beneficial infrastructure, and affordable homes. So it opens up another financing source for the state of Tennessee that, from everything we understand, is going to rapidly assist us in managing these infrastructure issues. It's also a multiplier. So we've all certainly seen TIF benefits, pilot benefits. That's a long-term process where you are paying, less property taxes further down the line to receive the benefits. With an IDD, as Will said, you're either reimbursed up front or you're paying from that cash right when you need it. And you can multiply these together by your lowered property tax obligations can be used to pay for your IDD funds up front, and the developer can use those funds from jump to pay for infrastructure. We do have an example of a project that Will's going to go through from Texas that we think is a good exemplar.
So the good thing about this being new is when you need something from one of the financial advisors or parties or administrators that are trying to come to the state, they often will provide it to you for free. So this is a co-op district in Hutto, Texas. What they did was they gave the developer $17.4 million of bonds at a 6.25 interest rate. A lot of times the problem with infrastructure is put in using a bridge loan, a construction loan or some form of mezzanine debt. A lot of times that debt is a floating interest rate above a fixed point, so like 8% plus the Fed funds rate. So as you can see, rather than pay 12% interest on that infrastructure, a developer much rather pay 6.25. And so in this particular scenario, the municipality, which would be Hutto, gave the developer a PID, tax version of IDD, and TIF financing. And so the TIF would help pay for the underlying cost of the IDD, and they took an area like this, and then they developed this. And so you can kind of see a lot of public infrastructure, a lot of walking and transportation ads here. I will not pretend to know all those buzzwords like you guys. You guys are going to suss me out real fast on that. But at the end of the day, also, the developer built a new city hall. So a lot of times you'll find developers will be able to find efficiencies in these projects that will allow for capture from both the developer's gain and the municipality's gain, most of the time at the expense of a bank who doesn't get to make a high interest rate construction loan. So this is kind of everything going right. So as far as potential projects, we have a lot of things up here. Probably what you'll see a lot is residential master plan communities being first movers. A lot of these folks building these master plan communities have done this in other states. So they know the game. They're very familiar with it. They're very excited about it. You're probably getting calls about it. So other than that, any kind of infrastructure, any kind of development that really needs heavy infrastructure, whether that be energy intensive to help put in large transmission lines or water heavy operations like battery plants. 5 minutes for questions.
Yeah, so that was fast. Questions for Jared or
both.
us? Yeah.
Yeah, I got a question for Metro. You guys are talking about expanding the potential boundaries for this. You guys are looking at expanding the boundaries. What's going to be the strategy for expanding it? Are you guys looking at the urban residential neighborhoods outside of the downtown core? Are you guys looking at some of these corridors? Because I know the Nations, they just got through a pretty big neighborhood plan. That was like 300 acres of trying to increase the density, add more housing options, figure out these bonuses. So what's going to be the strategy moving forward?
That's a great question. Let's see, what can I say? I would just say, yes, the nation's rezoning, or the UDO there, is an example of that. There's a lot of information out right now about the housing and infrastructure study and project that Metro's leading. And I would point you to those resources to see what's publicly available. And stay tuned for more.
can help make the house more affordable because the developer can then in turn, the developer doesn't really have a whole lot of risk because the infrastructure is backed by this so-called development district. And then one additional thing is when you hear about the California planning, you hear this term mellow roofs. And to me, it kind of reminds me of a California mellow roofs. Would you say this is anything different than the California Mellow Roofs Act?
I have no clue what that is. So,
Yeah, it's so basically, it sounds like the same thing. It's in California planning in the 1980s. They passed this thing called, I'm not from California by no means, but I know
Yeah.
about it. And it's a way to help offset the property tax losses by some proposition in 1978. So it sounds like it may be like that. But going back to the affordable housing question, has that ever been
yeah.
looked at?
I will say that the states that do this the most are Texas, Florida, and Colorado. So I know that it's really hard to do in California and people don't do a ton. As far as the affordable housing goes, the benefit here is that assessment rate is typically lower than your average mortgage rate. So essentially you have this concept of a capital stack from commercial development, and you're putting a capital stack in a residential setting. So they have their mortgage, which would be 90% of their home's cost, and then they would have the IDD assessments, which would be the other 10%. Typically that 10% is at a lower rate. A good actor, a developer coming through is going to have a residential disclosure program, so they're going to explain this to the homeowner, and under the statute, they can prepay. So essentially, if a homeowner comes in and is like, I could get a mortgage rate below that assessment, they could always get that mortgage and prepay the assessment off. So they'll have the option to go with the IDD debt on their property, which will hopefully be a little cheaper, and typically it is.
And also sets the sale point from the developer on a single-family home context, so they're not trying to have to recoup those costs for the infrastructure that they've paid up front at a higher interest rate. So they're able to price the same homes at a lower number to make the same return. So if the money is cheaper for the developer to create the single-family homes, they don't have to sell it at a higher rate to recover that same rate of return.
That's what we hope for. Sure.
Right, of course, yeah, I mean, ideally.
Yeah, for Metro, the additional height, how does the preservation benefit work? Is it a preservation of an asset on that site, or like a transfer of preservation? Like if they preserve something somewhere else? Project, they got the 30 additional stories. What did they preserve to get that benefit?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with that one and then I'll give you another example. So that building, the 60-story building, they preserved, I believe it was the Cohen building, which is like a 3 or 4-story building within downtown. Right now, the way the preservation bonus option works is that you glean the rights from the unused air rights from a historic property within the downtown district, and you can apply the equal, or I guess there's a multiplier, but relatively you can take the unused air rights, put that through the multiplier, and that spits out the amount of bonus height that you can get for the new building. So the example that I showed with the taller building, the 60-story building, the building they preserved was also in the downtown core subdistrict. So it was a 3-story structure that was entitled to 30 stories. And so they took the 27 unused stories of air rights, multiplied that by the footprint of that historic building. That gives you a number of square feet. They transferred that to their tower site and divided that by the floor plate of the tower, and that's how many stories they got for the high rise. That is, like the bar chart showed, that the preservation bonus has not been used a ton of times. That's one time instance it's been used. One thing to note is that the owner of the high-rise site went out and bought the historic building, and so we say like it's the same developer, the same owner, just giving the entitlements to themselves. We have not yet seen the concept of me, a owner of a historic building, going out and preserving my building and selling my rights to someone down the street who's interested in buying them. That's the bullet that was on the last slide of what if there's a TDR, transferable development rights bank concept. And yeah, we'll see if there's one more.
Question? Anybody?
Maybe I missed it, but how did Metro arrive at a maximum of 60 stories? Why not 50 or 70, like 60?
Yeah, so that was decided in 2010 when the downtown code zoning district was calibrated in the first place. Like bluntly, I'm not sure. That sub-district, the downtown core, is where the central business district is, and so that area. Well, and actually, I should say that sub-district has an unlimited amount of bonus height, so they could have gone taller than 60. That's just what the developer wanted to build. So it was a policy and zoning decision of Metro at that time when the zoning district was created to say the core sub-district can bonus to an unlimited height. And that's how we got that building. Whereas in the Gulch, the other example, they said we're only going to allow bonusing to 16 stories and no more. And that's how that other building came to that calibration.
Everybody?